Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Undetected, the Disappearance of Prisma Reyes. I'm your host, Kay. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's go ahead and jump right on in. As a reminder, you can also find us on all of your favorite podcast sites as well. We hope you enjoy this episode.
26-year-old Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes. Prisma Reyes
Just started working at 123 Texas Auto in Northwest Dallas.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes
left for lunch and never came back on Wednesday.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes of Mesquite.
The babysitter was expecting her around 7:40 p.m., but when she didn't show, the sitter started to worry and called police.
All I've ever tried to do is help.
Prisma Peralta Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
3 to 4 p.m. She's okay. We were talking about her job.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
She always showed up on time to pick up her son.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
I'm at a loss. I don't know what was going through her head.
Prisma Reyes.
Prisma Reyes.
I want to know where my sister's at.
Prisma Denisse Peralta Reyes went missing from the Dallas, Texas area on Wednesday, April 17th of 2019, around 6 p.m. local time. On the morning of her disappearance, she made a few phone calls and headed to work where she had just recently taken a position at 123 Tex Auto. Shortly after, she headed to E-Bar Tex-Mex for what appears to have been a very extended lunch break with someone who she might have been rekindling a flame with. After an alleged minor altercation occurs at the bar, when she is cut off and asked to leave, she heads down the road back towards what could have been her home, the babysitter, or even her work for that matter. A few minutes after leaving the bar, there are reports that Prisma was involved in a road rage incident, but didn't stick around for the cops to show up. As we understand it, it appears she continued on her way in the same direction, but ended up turning around shortly before getting on a major highway. She is later seen on surveillance video at a local apartment complex, the Olympus at Ross. Next, she is seen parking her vehicle in front of a side road on the apartment complex video footage. She then runs inside the parking garage, following the entrance of another vehicle. There is at least one other instance of Prisma being seen inside the apartment garage by another female. It was reported she may have also been seen by another man in or around an elevator as well, in addition to at least one other apartment video that shows Prisma while using her cell phone in front of the elevator in the parking garage. Prisma was very active on her cell phone most of the day, up until her phone abruptly stopped making or receiving calls at 6:01 p.m. She has never been seen or heard from again.
Now, first things first. This podcast may include information such as interviews, statements, police reports, videos, and more. We use this information in addition to our experience and background to provide our viewers with as much evidence and context to the cases we research. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. As always, we ask that everyone draw their own conclusions based on their own research.
This is by far one of the hardest cases I've ever worked on to date. As a retired licensed private investigator, I've seen a lot, but for some reason, this case stood out to me from day one. Although I've been following this case from the very beginning, it recently became personal when I started working directly with the family. Now that the 1-year anniversary of her disappearance is coming up on April 17th of 2020, it's more important than ever to figure out just what happened. With every day that passes, the family of Prisma continues to seek answers in her disappearance.
Prisma was just 26 years old at the time of her disappearance. But now a whole year has passed, her birthday just passed, and her whole family, especially her 7-year-old son, desperately miss her. Prisma was a young, loving mother who was trying to find her way in life. she had recently started a new job and was attempting to cut ties with those who didn't seem to fit into her future. Although we all know, not all ties are easily broken, right? Nonetheless, Prisma fought for those who she loved.
While talking with friends and family, it's pretty clear and well known that Prisma may have also gotten wrapped up with some not so kind and genuine people along the way. I think that's partially why I became so invested in this case. Prisma's case also seemingly just started to disappear from the public eye. Was it because of who people thought might be involved, as they're said to be quote-unquote dangerous? And who are they? Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Was it because of her past? Well, I hate to tell you, but we all have skeletons in our closet, right? Some may just have some that might be deeper and darker than others, but we're gonna have to get into that in another episode, because trust me, this stuff gets pretty deep.
As far as anyone knew, the day Prisma went missing started just like any other day. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. What all actually happened that Wednesday is still unknown to the public at this time. Although, we have been able to obtain some solid, concrete pieces of this puzzle. We've also tried to obtain the case file for this case, but have since been denied access to everything except for 5 pages. Those 5 pages contain the officer incident report, which took months to recover. In fact, we started the Freedom of Information Act request on January 29th, 2020. We were officially denied the rest of the file April 2nd, 2020. And we just received word this past Friday, April 10th, 2020, that this was denied.
Now some ask why we even thought obtaining this file was possible. Well, honestly, I didn't. Having experience in my fair share of public records requests of all sorts, I honestly just put in the request for the hell of it. I wanted to see what the police department might be willing to release to us a year later, especially since working with her stepfather, Dan Fuchs. But that's neither here nor there. I submitted the request and was expecting an instant denial. To my surprise, I received an estimate for her file costing $529.60. At the date of the estimate and the reissue of the estimate, there were a minimum of 1 body cam recording, 1,266 pages of some sort of evidence or police reports, records, filings, could be interview transcripts, etc., 2 CDs, and 44 DVDs in her case file.
Now we know the Mesquite Police Department has quite the file for Prisma's disappearance. Was her disappearance a part of something larger? Are they just missing something when it comes to making an arrest, and at the very least her disappearance? They must know something with all of that information, right?
Her family and I immediately went to work trying to obtain this file. In the meantime, we continued to pursue every avenue, interview, and lead we could obtain. So even without all of this evidence in the case file the Mesquite PD has, we started our own. I never anticipated we could get the whole file due to it being an open case, but we were never advised otherwise, so we did what we were told to do. I got to work on a GoFundMe and raise the funds with the help of her family, friends, and the online community of our Find Prisma Facebook page and group.
Fast forward to today, and we now have quite the file ourselves, even without PD. Although we may be lacking a few major key pieces, including Prisma, through this podcast you'll be given a very detailed look at her case over the next several months.
I remember it like it was yesterday. My better half comes into the room to tell me the Facebook page that I had created for Prisma Reyes had been set ablaze with comments and questions about an incident at a Walmart, not too far from where Prisma actually went missing.
233259, suspicious activity at Walmart, 12220, FM423.
I started reading comments, messages, and Facebook posts explaining how a young woman had been seen running from the vehicle towards the front of a parking lot into the Walmart. The woman had allegedly been abducted anywhere from days to months prior, but luckily, at some point, This woman had escaped and fled for a crowd of people at this local shopping center. A man had taken to social media to share his experience of this event. People started asking him questions and posting pictures of Prisma on his Facebook status to see if the woman even remotely resembled Prisma. At one point, it was said that she did, in fact, resemble Prisma, and that she might have even been missing since April, when Prisma went missing.
Even not suspicious activity at Walmart, the female is now saying that she was refusing to leave the restroom area. 243, can you back officers on the suspicious activity at Walmart? 423, the female is requesting a female officer. Well, you know.
Well, in true me fashion, I got right to work, trying to determine if this woman was, in fact, Prisma. After realizing her family hadn't posted anything on Facebook or other social media sites about anything of the such, I reached out to her stepfather, Dan Fuchs, to see if I could be of any assistance to him and to his family. Although Dan is technically her stepdad, Dan is the only father that Prisma has ever known, and to Prisma, Dan is dad. To make a long story not so short, the family hadn't heard anything about this, what I have now dubbed as the Walmart incident. After 3 long, agonizing days of speculation and conflicting information, it was finally determined that the woman that had this Walmart incident was not Prisma. It took Prisma's mother, Lilia, actually going down to the station to find out in person that it was not her. Needless to say, something that started out as me just trying to raise awareness for Prisma's disappearance has now turned into something so much more than that. There's absolutely no way I could just let my experience and past career in private investigations go to waste when there is a family literally begging for answers. That's just not who I am. At this point, I almost feel it's my duty to bring Prisma home for her family, especially for her young son. Speaking of Prisma's son, among the people that I've actually talked to is this son's father, which is one of Prisma's exes. This might catch some of you off guard, but I have to say, I was quite surprised by the tone of our conversations, and how he at least seems very willing to try to help provide any information he thinks may be beneficial in finding Prisma. I know there has been a lot of speculation in regards to him, but we'll get into this a lot more in detail at a later time. Let's just say he has provided my investigative partner with court documents and records, even proving some of what he says. And when they weren't requested, he actually offered. So for the meantime, can we just give the guy a break? I mean, if nothing else, please just do it for their son. Believe me, there are plenty of other potential persons of interest that come to mind when working through this case. All of those people should keep all of the internet sleuths busy in the meantime. There's plenty of twists and turns to go around. For example, her ex she met at E-Bar, and the fact that he allegedly gave a fake name the day at the bar while with Prisma? We already know that they had an on-again, off-again, volatile relationship. In my eyes, this guy is basically the perfect fall guy, or well, that's a whole other episode in its entirety, unfortunately. So, more on that later. Not to mention the little-known fact that Prisma's 2017 Jeep wasn't even in her name. It was actually in the name of someone else, another guy at that. We've just recently obtained this information, so we are still trying to figure out how this man might play into things, or even play into Prisma's life at this point. I can tell you this though, most of the people in Prisma's life didn't even know that this man exists. There's more bad than good in this disappearance, unfortunately, but I digress. Anyway, some of Prisma's family and friends have honestly become an extended branch of my very own family. I've also met the other half of my investigation team for Prisma's disappearance. Together, we plug away, little by little, day after day, and week after week. To this very day, we continue to interview others, put in records requests, turn in credible tips to law enforcement, including those discovered by our very own team, and more. We also continue to analyze and review CCTV footage, incident reports, missing persons reports, cell phone and social media data, and much more. Unfortunately, 15 months later, we still have very few answers, and although we've been able to fill in some of the blanks on her last days, hours, and even minutes, we still have so many questions. When we were initially denied our Freedom of Information Act request a few months back, we really started to dig that much more, to discover the answers we knew we needed, but that we were not going to be able to get from law enforcement at that time.
Pardon my raspy, hoarse voice. I guess I suppose I fit right in with this pandemic, right? But nonetheless. Anyways, when we initially started this podcast, our goal was to help raise awareness for Prisma's disappearance, as discussed prior. We ultimately wanted to release maybe 1 to 2 episodes a month over a series of a few months. As you can tell, so far, I've just kind of sucked at that whole schedule thing. But honestly, so much has changed since all of this started, and since then, with this case, that I've become so wrapped up in the investigation that the podcast honestly kind of just fell to the wayside. With that being said, we also wanted to lay out the potential suspects, or persons of interest rather, discuss some theories, dive into the timeline, discuss our insider knowledge on the case, and more. Many of you know we're not only in contact with Prisma's immediate family, but we're now in contact with her child's father, her friends, former coworkers, and more. And as of most recently, we're also in contact with the detective on the case, Detective Barrett. We don't want to jeopardize anything with the investigation, and we never have. The good thing about this so-called pause, I guess we'll call it, for lack of a better term, is that when we come back, we'll have more information, more evidence, and more interviews than ever. I can also assure you that no one else will have this kind of insight, but in the meantime, again, I just don't want to mess up a damn thing right now. And if I'm being honest, one thing I'm really good at is screwing shit up. So let's just not even go there right now, okay? As you can probably pick up on already, a lot has happened over the course of the last few months that has ultimately brought us to where we are today, including the decision that I have ultimately come to at this time in regards to this podcast. By now, you all are probably pretty familiar with how I became involved in this case, and you all should know by now that we have constant communication with Prisma's loved ones, and that door of communication is always open. Although I guess one thing I never expected to happen was for Prisma's loved ones to become so close to my heart and become so important to me. I have never wanted to find Prisma or seek justice for her and her son more than I do now. And with that being said, my time now needs to be devoted to doing just that. Not to mention the fact that it's more important than it has ever been, honestly, to keep details of Prisma's disappearance close to the chest. It's funny how things really kind of seem to take a turn over the last few weeks, as I legitimately just told my partner, we could always, Sarah Turney it. What does Sarah Turney it mean? Well, go ahead and just check out the Voices for Justice podcast on the disappearance of Sarah's sister, Alyssa Turney, and you'll soon understand exactly what I mean. But to make a long story short, Sarah took to the media and her very own podcast to fight for justice for her sister, and ultimately achieved just that, as her father was just arrested a short time ago. Sarah never gave up on her sister, as we refused to give up on Prisma. No matter how you put it, we're going to fight for Prisma. And that's what has brought me to this very difficult decision to, in fact, put our podcast series on hold, for the time being anyway. I stayed up late last night trying to find the right words to say to you all. How do I adequately explain our reasoning for simply bringing this podcast to an abrupt halt and a pause? One thing I need you all to know is that this is far from the end. Rather, it's truly just a new beginning, a really good new beginning. We're at such a pivotal point in the investigation that it would be beyond silly for us to release some sort of information that may hinder finding Prisma in any way, shape, or form, and ultimately lead to the conviction of whoever is involved and responsible for her disappearance. If there's one thing that I can say for certain at this time, it's that Prisma would never have just left her son on her own doing. That is abundantly clear. By now, you also likely know just how invested we are in the case and with Prisma's loved ones, obviously. We've mentioned a few times how her son Dominic is our driving force. We want to bring his mommy home to him and, at the very least, bring him answers and justice that they both deserve. My partner and I have spent countless hours conducting interviews over the last few months, and as much as I'd love to release that information and clear the air about some things, unfortunately, now just isn't the time to do so. I even had a so-called moment this past weekend as we were bombarded with false accusations and assumptions, seemingly all of a sudden, simply because we're just not willing to release certain information at this time. The general public seems to feel completely entitled to information that could make a case fall apart, put potentially innocent people in harm's way, and much more. This past weekend, I guess I had what my mom would call a come to Jesus moment. I mean, it just made me realize it's just not worth it, and it's much more important. My time is much better spent trying to find answers to Prisma's disappearance versus arguing with jerk-offs on the internet. Anyway, sometimes you just have to do what's best for the case. And in my opinion, continuing this podcast and being constantly harassed to release information not privy to the public isn't what's best for this case. Finding Prisma is what's most important, no matter what others may think. And the awesome part about it is that the people who need to know this already do. Although we won't be working on new episodes for release of this podcast right now and right away, there are still ways that you can keep up with the case and join the discussion. Although we cannot be a part of that discussion right now, we definitely take in your tips and any information that you guys have. It's very helpful, so please continue to do so in the meantime. If you search for the little @ symbol, Find Prisma on Facebook, you should come across the page Where is Prisma Reyes immediately. Just click on that page and go ahead and like it and follow it, and that way you can get any kind of updates that we have. There's also a discussion group under the exact same name, and there's a little bit more discussion on the case. I'll also put the link in the description below, along with a website that you can visit for more information. At this time, I have a promise to fulfill, and that is to bring answers to Prisma's family and ultimately bring her home. I found myself saying last night, we're either going to be bringing her home alive and we're going to be the best of friends for the rest of time, or at the very least, I'm going to get her loved ones, especially her young son, the answers, and hopefully the justice that they deserve. I mean, hell, who knows? We may be back in a few days, or a few months, but we definitely hope it's sooner rather than later. But unfortunately, for now anyway, we're going to have to sign off. Rest assured though, this isn't goodbye. It's simply I'll see you soon. Hopefully, very, very soon.
We continue to discover new clues and leads every week. We are also doing all we can to assist the family in obtaining the answers that they rightfully deserve. So don't they say something like, if you want to bring attention to something, you have to make a lot of noise? We'll cue the choir, because we're about to start singing and we need your help. As of the recording of this podcast, unfortunately, Prisma Denisse Peralta Reyes has not been found and still remains missing. To date, no one has ever been arrested or further held accountable for Prisma's disappearance. With that being said, we continue to seek information on Prisma's whereabouts and the answers her loved ones deserve.
Our goal of this podcast is to help find Prisma. We hope to raise awareness that Prisma is still missing, in addition to generating new leads in regards to her case. New episodes will be released as we are able to release this information, so please stay tuned. There will be a few links in the description box below, including the official Facebook page and group that some of her family and friends are currently active in addition to the Teespring link where you can purchase your Find Prisma apparel. All proceeds will go to any expenses necessary to locate Prisma, including but not limited to the reward fund set up to help generate reliable leads in locating Prisma. You can also donate directly to the family's GoFundMe, which will also be located down below. With that being said, if you know anything, no matter how big or small, please contact Mesquite Police Department at 972-285-6336. Again, that's 972-285-6336. And or Detective Dustin Barrett at 972-216-6791. 972-216-6791. Thank you.